share some information with you guys about the telework survey that we did in June. So, and a little bit of background, we did, as Jason mentioned, just rebrand the MPO. And so this is to show you why, if you're not very familiar with the MPO and what we do and why we would do a survey like this. The MPO is a regional transportation planning agency. We are federally designated and we're responsible for leading collaborative planning and funding of the regional transportation system. And we have a transportation demand management program called Rideshare, Etc. And that program is focused on reducing single occupancy vehicle use in the region. So the mission is to connect individuals, businesses, and organizations with convenient alternatives to driving alone. And the graphic that you see here on the right, this is some of the many tools and strategies that are out there that transportation demand management or TDM programs like Rideshare, Etc. Advocate for. And you can see telecommuting is one of them. So telecommuting is something that programs like this have been promoting since probably the 80s. And it's always been one piece of this puzzle, along with biking and walking and public transit and flex scheduling. Focusing on commuter transportation is one of the big pieces of this, because commuter transportation, that's a daily trip that people take. It's a habitual thing. If we can encourage people to make new habits around how they commute, it can have a big impact on the transportation system in the region and the air quality and sustainability and all of those things. So the Safer at Home order first went into effect, the very first one, on March 25th. That feels like eons ago. I was like counting the months that it's been since then, and it's amazing, you know, how long we've been going through this. That order was extended to May 26th. And we, at that time, were then starting to develop this survey. There were surveys being done in other regions of the US as well as nationwide. Everybody was just really interested to see, you know, how are people reacting to this extremely new, very intense situation? How are people adapting? The survey was 3 weeks long, June 9th to the 30th. And our main goals were to understand, we were seeing all this national data come out. We wanted to understand for our region, you know, what are the implications for how workplaces might be organized in the future, what might be the commuter transportation trends, and then identify some needs and tools and opportunities, things that we could do either through the Rideshare, Etc. program or through other organizations that work with employers in the region. What are tools that we should be aware of that we can connect employees and employers to help make this easier and to help encourage remote work longer term if it's something that's working. So we received almost 1,900 responses. 99% of the people were actively working at that time. And there was a good spread of people who were non-managers, managers, and then executive leaders. So this was distributed region-wide. I know many of you guys took the survey, so thank you so much for doing that and distributing it. DMI was a big help with distribution. And it was geared toward anyone. We wanted to hear from anyone who was working remotely, and we wanted this spread to get some perspectives from the different levels of management. We also had a good range of people reporting from different sizes of organizations. So the top green bar is organization that has fewer than 10 staff. All the way down to here, this is 10,000 or more. So you can see a nice spread. The biggest ones were between 50 and about 250 staff and 1,000 to 5,000 staff. Definitely saw big bumps when the survey went out through the city of Madison staff and the Dane County staff. So I know we received a lot of responses from them. Excuse me. And for home zip codes, so we asked people where people are living. These are very dispersed. You can see that there's the highest concentration, I think was about 12% of people reporting from the northeast, kind of northeast Madison side, but really throughout the county and beyond the county. The workplace zip codes were much more concentrated. 38% of the respondents reported that their office location was downtown Madison. And we wanted to see how people, what were the habits before COVID, and then how much had changed after COVID. So these are pretty predictable. I mean, we knew this already. 74% of people reported driving alone to work. And the majority of people commuted for about 15 to 30 minutes. But there were about a third who were commuting over 30 minutes, which is typically not an enjoyable, when you hit like over that 30-minute mark, people start to say they're not really happy with their commute. We also did, when we looked at when we broke that out by organization size, it's just interesting to see that the larger organizations, so these bottom few, have lower rates of people who are driving alone. So the green bar is how many people drove alone to work. So we can see that those larger organizations do have higher rates of people walking, biking, and teleworking already. And we asked how common was remote work at an organization. So so you're seeing here that a third of people responded that remote work was simply not allowed. So that's a pretty large chunk of people who didn't even have that option. Only if we look up here to the very common and somewhat common, that's less than 10% of people reporting that it often happened. Another 40% were saying that it was allowed, but not common. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. When you look at other surveys and data, often if people are allowed but they decide not to telework, sometimes it relates to feelings of disconnection or isolation if they're the only one doing it, feeling like they might not be promoted as often as their colleagues if they're seen as being home more. So there are a lot of kind of concerns from the employee side about why they would choose not to, even if they may be interested in doing it. And this is a comparison on the left side prior to COVID-19 and then at the height of restrictions. So we were asking people to respond to that when the safer at home order, when the height of that was in place, that March 25th to May 26th. So it basically flipped on the head. So 78% of people previously never working from home, flipping to 80% of people working from home at least one day per week. One of the things that was also a positive is that 61% of people said that their organization was at least somewhat prepared to transition to remote work. There were very few people that felt like it was a complete disaster trying to make this shift. The other thing here that's interesting to point out related to some of the later data is that a large majority of executives and managers responding did not supervise employees working remotely. And that's something that's always been a concern, why remote work has often not been adopted as largely across the US, is that concern about what will employee productivity be like? How will we manage employees? How will we know what they're doing? And so that was certainly something that we're not familiar with in this region. And so what we learned, the top challenges, these basically, if we put them into buckets, relate to, first, the biggest one, having a lack of access to equipment, that they needed. Dual monitors was a big one. And the quality of the workspace. This was such an unexpected transition that people really didn't have a chance to prepare and just got thrown into it. And so there was a lot of adjustment there. The second one was barriers to communication and collaboration. That was both between coworkers as well as between employees and managers. And then overall kind of issues and concerns related to negative impacts to workplace culture and social connectivity. So just feeling kind of isolated, people missing their coworkers, managers a little worried that the workplace culture might be eroding, maybe less professionalism in how people are dressing when they're on Zoom calls versus in person. And one of those partly can relate to, I think I have data later, but a lot of people, majority of people did not have access to tools like virtual water coolers or other employer-sponsored social activities. Some companies already have those as part of the normal part of their operations, but most people don't have access to those. And we asked what tools and resources people had access to just to see if there was anything that really stood out that was missing. People seem to have access to primarily what they needed. Video conferencing on the left, the biggest one, instant messaging, cloud-based file storage. There's pretty good adoption of those tools already. Then once we get down here though, this is where we see that the employer scheduled social time, virtual message boards, and then some of the project management, more sophisticated project management software that could be helpful in a remote situation, people did not have access to. And then we asked about personal challenges. The biggest one over here, about 50% of people saying their greatest personal challenge has been anxiety about the pandemic. And that's obviously a huge concern, can have a big impact on how people are doing during the day when they're working. That was something that managers and executives then said they were really interested in resources around how to help employees through times of crisis like this, because this was a very, very unprecedented situation. The second largest one, about 35% of people saying struggling to unplug, frequent distractions. I think that relates very much to having kids and a spouse. Everybody's at home. So there's really no kind of space, for people to carve out for themselves. It's very challenging for families during this time. We asked about the positive benefits. The positive benefits were reported at much higher rates than the challenges. So the biggest one up here is saving money by not commuting. And that's over 70% of people. The second one was more time with family and friends, more time to sleep, more time to work on household things. Some of these comments here, I mean, people just had comment after comment of, I love being with my pets. I love having windows. I don't feel as stressed out. Even in the open-ended comments when we were asking about challenges, a lot of those comments actually related to positives. People saying, well, it was a challenge in the beginning, but now I've adjusted and now I really like it. So it's really interesting to read through all of those things that people were saying about their experience. So those benefits really fit into three buckets of the first being people saving time and money, and then converting those savings into positive things like exercising or sleeping or spending time with family. The second big one was a greater level of comfort and less stress. Several people commenting about how not commuting. So for us, not commuting, that was something that they felt it's amazing to not have that stress every day. And then there was also feelings of greater personal and professional satisfaction in a variety of areas. So when business returns to normal, what this means is that almost 80% of people responding said that they would prefer to continue working from home at least 1 day per week. And so then within that, that breaks down into some people preferring 1 to 2 days, some people preferring 3 to 4 days, a few people preferring to continue to work at home every single day. 69% of people said they will view an employer more favorably if they offer the option to work remotely. So that's something, I think that's a really important message for employers, because that relates directly to talent recruitment and retention, that people will be looking for that as an option. They're not likely going to take advantage of that option every single day. People are wanting to balance work at home time where they can concentrate and be super productive with time in the office where they can connect and collaborate and nurture those social bonds that we all care about. But it's something that people will be looking for if they're looking for a new job or looking to switch jobs. Related to those benefits, I pulled this out, 41% of people said that their overall feelings, and keep in mind, this is at the very beginning of when this all occurred, probably the biggest point of adjustment and shock. And almost half of people were saying that their, excuse me, sorry, that their overall feelings of life satisfaction have improved. So saying they were better or somewhat better. That number does not include the people who said that they felt that they were the same. So there was only a small number of people who said that they felt their life satisfaction has actually decreased, very small number. And this pulls out, there were some interesting, if we break out and look at some differences between non-managers, managers, and executives, there are some differences in some of these responses. So you can see here that managers and executives would prefer to be in the office more than non-managers. Basically, the purple, orange, and blue are all colors of people saying they'd like to be in the office at some point during the week. And then the yellow, blue, and green are maybe, monthly or never. Similarly, managers and executives reported a little bit less feelings of life satisfaction, a little bit lower during this time. And also, oh, I just lost it. I'll come back to it. And then, so what managers and executives are saying about, kind of how they feel about, so we're seeing that employees are really interested in staying at home periodically. And managers and execs are saying that they do anticipate post-pandemic more employees working from home periodically, and then even some more employees working from home nearly full time. So those are good numbers. It indicates that they are thinking ahead to what will our workplace look like, what are the tools and policies that we might need to have in place to allow this to occur. And when we asked about productivity, because this again was one of the big questions, how productive and efficient will people be? Will it be possible to manage people remotely? 2/3 of managers and execs were saying that they felt that their workforce has been between 3/4 and 100% efficient while working remotely. And then another 12% actually said that the efficiency has been better than ever, which is very interesting. And compared to pre-COVID, when we asked how do people feel now compared to before, 30% of people, 29%, were saying that they feel greater satisfaction with their personal job performance. and 45% feel exactly the same level of satisfaction with their personal job performance. And then we asked about desired resources, and there were some differences between employees and executives and managers. Better ways to collaborate was one theme that definitely spanned across everyone. For employees, the biggest things that they're interested in are tips on how to improve their home office, better ways to collaborate with coworkers, and then guidance on balancing work and home life. Because this, again, it was something that was very unexpected, and we really didn't have much time to prepare for it. And I think with there has been extra strain on finding that balance between work and home life with everything else that's been added in with the pandemic in terms of kids at home and spouse at home and kind of all the other stressors that are occurring. For executives and managers, they're interested in best practices, training and assistance for managers and for employees, and then guidance on what are the most useful technologies. So pretty much everybody has something like this, a video conferencing capability, cloud-based storage, but what are some of those other things? Like, what is a virtual water cooler? Is that something that we might want to have? There are a lot of different tools out there, and so it can be really hard to try to navigate and figure out which would be the best for your business or organization. And I think for us, for transportation and transportation demand management, the big takeaways from these findings were that we now can see, we've experienced this, we can see that telework is possible in our region. There are definitely other regions in the country that had already had people teleworking at much higher rates. But it was pretty new to us. And so we see that it's possible. We see that there are a lot of benefits both to individuals personally and for their professional, for their productivity, as well as to businesses, and then the community at large when we think about the reduced congestion, the better air quality, for businesses, the implications for the cost of parking and office space if you have fewer people coming into the office on a daily basis. And then there are challenges that we can learn from. Some of those challenges, that the top one, anxiety about the pandemic, I mean, that goes away when the pandemic goes away. But the challenges that will stay, what can we learn from them? And we can plan for the future. You know, there are tools and there are ways that we can address those challenges. And I think the messages for employers are that it's important to think now, to be preparing for as the pandemic starts to recede, developing policies and procedures and communications that create a culture that supports a flexible workplace, that allows people to work from home sometimes and then come in and do their collaborative work. Flexible scheduling is another important piece of that, to helping people balance work and life. Providing the right tools and resources for employees, both managers and non-managers, so that they can thrive in that kind of environment. And then maintaining open communication, so doing things like this at your own organization. The city of Madison did an internal employee survey to see how everybody was feeling about remote work and what resources people needed. So continuing to do that so that we can learn from what's working and what's not, and adjust as needed. And this is what we'll be doing. I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information here with this group. We want to share this information as widely as we can with employers, organizations, agencies, and then start really connecting employers with relevant resources and encouraging this idea that, you know, telework can and should be a larger part of workplace norms even after COVID goes away. And so looking at how can we provide resources linked to existing ones, develop partnerships within the region to share this information and promote it. So that's all I have, and excited to hear questions and just conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was great stuff. And thank you for being here today. Thank you for also giving us a lot of this information for our State of the Downtown, too. So there's some good information there. One of the quick questions is, I know we've recorded this, and this will be on our YouTube channel. Are we able to share the presentation with everybody?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, I'll send you a copy.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So we're going to open it up for questions from the group. We've already got one question from Larry. Larry, how are you this morning?
I'm awake. Thank you, Jason. You're looking good this morning.
Sorry about the 8. That's my bad.
So Zia, there's a lot of talk about equity when we talk about employment situations here in Madison. And my concern with this is that many people cannot work from home to do their jobs. Many people of color in particular have been affected more by the virus because they can't work from home. And so my concern with the survey is it doesn't really take into effect how that working from home affects, interracial collaboration, the difference between people who work at home and don't work at home and work for the same employer, for example. Was that looked at all in terms of satisfaction or the importance of those type of issues? Because telecommuting, I think it's a great thing, but a lot of people can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep, that's a really good point. With this survey, we did not delve too much into those issues. But as we've talked about that in terms of, as you're saying, what are those impacts or implications around equity? One of the things, as COVID is still around and still existing, one of the kind of benefits of promoting teleworking for people who can do it is so that the public transit system is freed up for people who can't. So that essential workers, because there are limits right now, on metro buses, they're not trying to encourage everybody to get back on the buses. And so we want to keep the transportation system open for the people who need to use it. Moving forward, as that becomes less of an issue, this definitely speaks to some of the things that employers can and should be thinking about in terms of what they provide for employees. Because again, this was such an unexpected situation. There were probably many employers, majority, who didn't have things in place like a stipend that would give people the opportunity to purchase a monitor or a desk chair or a router or whatever it is they need. And there are companies that do that. And I've heard recently that there are some that have now instituted stipends for employees. But I think figuring out ways that the employer can basically take cost savings that they may realize from more people working from home and reinvest those savings into helping people do that effectively. So I think that's one way to get at it.
Other questions for Zia? Jay.
Thanks, Zia. Maybe I missed it because I did have to step away for a few minutes, but was there any look at of the people, sorry if the background noise is coming through. Was there any look at people who are going to continue to remote work and what their current or their previous mode of transportation is?
Do you mean in terms of people who know that they will plan to continue working after
Right.
COVID?
Yeah, so what I'm getting at is, do we know how this is going to change the modal mix as some people choose to remote work and other people can't?
Not to that level of detail. I mean, I think these results certainly imply what could occur in terms of what the demand, there's a significant demand from employees to be at home more often. But the key now in our minds is making sure that employers understand this and are actually actively preparing and planning for that to be the case, because it could be a huge, I mean, there have been studies in other regions that looking at what the, you know, if you had 2% or 3% of your workforce working from home 3 days a week, what is that impact on vehicle miles traveled in your region? And it's very significant. So that's something that we want to build on, this momentum, and not, I think as humans, we're so ready to kind of go back to the way things were when something sort of crazy happens. You know, we adapt to it. We're really good at adapting, but then when that goes away, we tend to slide back into what we had been doing previously. And we really don't want to do that. And there were a lot of comments from people saying, oh, I'm really worried my employer's going to immediately go back to how things were. Oh, we've learned so much. I hope we actually take action on what we've learned.
Can I just ask like a little bit of a follow-on to that? It sounded like the question about the mode was just asked at that point in time of what had you done previously.
Yeah.
Was there A, a question that said, what are you doing now? Or B, a plan to ask these questions again in the future? Because I was thinking along the same lines of, you know, how has this changed, or how will it continue to change?
Yeah, I mean, I think our assumption was, so we saw that 80% of people were working from home. So in terms of, we were focusing on the commute. So then they're not commuting by, you know, any mode. We didn't ask what is there. It would have been interesting because we know that bicycling has shot through the roof for recreation and maybe other essential trips. We don't know. So that would be interesting to see. I think we don't have plans currently to do this again, but it's something that we can consider and will consider. I think it would be great to have another set of information now that we are, you know, 9 months, will be 9 months into it by the end of the year.
Yeah, I have a question about transportation planning and parking planning. So do you see this potentially changing the way municipalities and zoning departments require a certain number of parking spaces for work buildings, for office buildings in the future? Is that potentially
I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I think it's still quite fresh.
Yeah.
And so with COVID still being something that everyone's responding to, I think this is where it would be good to have more information from employers about what are you actually planning for moving forward. But I think from the standpoint of being able to see that it's possible, I mean, you know, it's something that cities could do, reduce parking and say that, well, you know, that you can make it work.
Right.
But, yeah.
Or share it, you know, between businesses, because they don't need, each business doesn't need as much as they did. So yeah.
I think it will be more seeing how employers, what trends come out from employers, and then, you know, if more people are working from home, that would be great. And then, I mean, it is a huge cost savings. That's one of the things from the employer side. And it would also be interesting to see some data. I know Sustain Dane has been working with employers that are seeing and that have actually been quantifying their the benefits to their business from a sustainability standpoint. Right. And so from a cost standpoint too, in terms of what could this mean if they didn't have to pay for a quarter of the parking that they currently have. Right. Would be really interesting.
Thanks.
Chuck, or did you come up? Question for you? Or you just went off of mute? One of the two. I just saw it. Nope. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, you do have a question.
Well, not on the question. I was going to make a comment. Steve, that was an excellent question. I'm hopeful that things will change, but my understanding is that most zoning codes are, the requirement for parking is based on AASHTO's estimations of trip generations produced by the kind of land use that they're talking about, and that I am pessimistic that those estimations are going to change very quickly. So yeah, I'm hopeful that employers will take it upon themselves to do whatever they can, but I don't see municipal codes evolving as fast as we would like.
Yeah, that's a great point. It does take a while to change those standards.
I saw Bill and Jay at the same time. So, Bill?
Yeah, I'd just like to weigh in here is that, in some situations, there are code requirements for parking, number of spaces per unit or number of spaces per square foot of retail space or something like that. But actually, when we get to situations in downtown Madison, the situation actually becomes the inverse. The developer is pushing for more parking because they know their tenants, their business tenants, see having parking as essential to being able to recruit employees. And it's the city that's actually trying to discourage the number of parking spaces. So that will be an interesting thing to see how it plays out once we get an idea of how many employees each business is going to want to have in there each day, and whether there is an actual drop in demand. But up to this point, it's been the large office tenants that are driving the demand for parking spaces rather than the city.
Thank you, Bill. Jay?
Well, Bill kind of hit on some of what I was going to ask about. My question was going to be, to what extent in Madison are codes driving parking? And is this an opportunity to just get rid of parking requirements altogether? I mean, it seems to me that downtown there is kind of a public concern for how much parking gets made because of such limited space. But on the outskirts, like, why not just let the market decide? Is this an opportunity to just let the market decide and just get rid of all parking requirements in Madison, or at least 99% of them?
Bill, and for those of you who don't know, Bill is the executive director of Smart Growth. So,
yeah, I mean, the business, the development community, that's the argument they make all the time. Look, we know what our tenants need. Our tenants tell us what we need, and so rather than have the government tell us how many parking spaces, let the developers and their tenants figure out how many parking spaces are needed and do that. Because and sometimes the code requires far more parking spaces than really the developers and tenants need. And other times the city's trying to enforce less parking spaces than the fewer parking spaces than the developer and the tenants say they need.
Janine and then Gary. Janine and then Gary. Janine, you're muted.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Responding to those requests for proposals for space, I can concur with what Bill is saying, that the office tenants are really often demanding still quite a bit of parking.
Thank you, Janine. Gary. And then Chuck. Gary and
Yeah,
then Chuck.
I would take on this city side more, because one, who's actually the tenant changes. Building, if you're doing a building or whatever, it's going to be there for a long time. And you do need to accommodate for the fact that there's flexibility there as far as the tenant goes. And then the other thing is, if it's not enough parking, it's the city that has to deal with the overflow of people parking where they shouldn't, or people parking in neighborhoods, or whatever it would be. Then the other side of the coin is, nothing's been said about the very probability that our cars are going to get smaller in the future, and therefore you will be able to park more of them in the same space, or even self-driving cars that will park themselves and not have to leave room for people to get in and out as the doors go. So you got two things going here, and it's going to be interesting times. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Chuck.
I guess the other thing I wanted to point out is that a lot of times the big developments they're planned unit developments. So details like how much parking are all negotiated as part of that process anyway. So, you know, the whatever the code says is less an ironclad rule than a starting point for the negotiation.
Perfect. Anyone else for questions and or the discussion? Before we get to, oh, Bill, yeah, Bill, how are you?
Good. Yeah, great discussion. And I think what I've heard is that part of the parking requirements are driven by lending institutions that, as Gary mentioned, if at the future point a new tenant comes in and wants more parking and the developer's, you know, gone belly up or whatever, that the lending institution doesn't want to get kind of constrained by parking. But the city, is my understanding, it does not have a parking requirement per se for new developments downtown. And, you know, it's more what can a developer get in terms of loans to make a development work.
Thank you, Bill. I think Steve?
Yeah, I'm glad you spoke up, Bill. And I think I know the picnic street ramp was just opened. I don't know what month that was. They're right next to the municipal building. It'll be interesting to see what kind of use that ramp has gotten, well, what it's gotten over the last 6 months, and then what it will continue to get. Is it more of a residential use and less of a work use for a downtown ramp? It's right in the center of a lot of workplaces, but also a lot of high-rise apartment building living spaces. So I think seeing how we use public parking ramps will also be interesting as we continue through COVID and move out of COVID.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else? Chris McCahill says parking, exclamation point. I like that. Chris and I have had many conversations about parking. This is a great conversation. I think we certainly should look to maybe have this as just a general topic in one of our months coming up as well.
I'll just add that if you guys, this is obviously we've touched on a lot of different audiences that would be good to have this information start percolating down to. So that is our goal, to get this information out, to start the conversation, to have businesses and organizations and employers start really absorbing it and thinking about it. So if you have organizations that you represent or are in touch with that you think would be good to bring this information to, if there are resources that you would be interested in, such as like an info sheet or anything that would be helping you have this conversation in greater depth where you work, let me know, because that's our goal, and we want to help. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Well, thank you, Zia, from everyone at TMI. That was an excellent presentation, which led to an excellent discussion. So thank you, and thank you for the data for the state of the downtown, and thank you for this report. I think it's very helpful. And if you need help with any future reports, let us know. There certainly seems to be interest here. I want to take a couple minutes now for updates from our different partners. We've got Bill with the parking division, Renee. We've also got, I see Helen and Morgan are here from B-Cycle. If there's anyone else that wants to give an update, we're going to start with Bill. Bill with the city's parking team.
Thanks, and boy, thanks to Zia for a great presentation. It opens up a whole lot of questions, and where do we go from here? Lots unknown, but in terms of today, what's going on? Yeah, we opened the Wilson Street garage behind the Madison Municipal Building. Gosh, it's been quite a number of months now. Our use in our system overall has been very low, especially off street. It went down to about 3% at the height of COVID, if you will, or earlier, and we're at around 20 to 25% use of our parking facilities right now. So we're still very low. But things we're doing right now are converting some blocks to more smart single space meters. Our old multi-space kiosks are end of life, and we're converting those back to a single space meter, but one that takes credit cards. And we're getting close to having a mobile payment option again. That's unfortunately not been available just when we needed contactless payment the most, but it's getting close. And then we're just doing what we can to support the streeteries as we head into the winter. Kind of new guidelines have come out for the extension. And I don't know if we'd want to have Megan Blakehorst at some point, speak to the group about kind of where things are at there, because she's really the one in the know. But that's it for parking right now.
That's a great idea. We certainly work with Megan a lot with our friends at the Business Improvement District, who are more directly affected by the streetery. But those who don't know, the streetery was extended through, was it April 14th or April 25th of next year? Can't remember when the permits are out again. Something like that. I think
25th or 26th of April.
Yeah, Bill might know. Yeah, Bill.
Oh yeah, I wasn't going to answer that question. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. But I wanted to comment on kind of a related thing that Jason and I have been working on. There's a potential ordinance percolating right now that is designed to help make more room for street trees to be able to flourish and have more canopy space, and it would change in areas of the city where there's a 0 setback that you can build right up to the sidewalk. There's a proposal to make that a 5-foot setback to create more canopy space. But one of the things that might be allowed or contemplated as if that ordinance passes is that it may be that developers will ask the city to eliminate on-street parking and let them move that curb out to create the more space for the trees, so you don't have to do the 5-foot setback. And so I just wanted to alert people to that possibility that there might be a push in some projects to actually eliminate on-street parking spaces in the kind of the core city. Just since it's a transportation group, I thought you should be aware of that.
Thank you very much, Bill. Any questions for well, there's a lot of Bills. Any question for Bill Putnam? Or Bill Carter? Or Bill Connors? How many more Bills do we have? All right. No. Seeing none, then we'll move to our friend, the Ped Bike team, Renee Calloway. How are you, Renee?
Hello, thanks for having me. So always lots going on, I feel like, in the transportation world. You may have heard or not that it is Walktober, our month of celebrating, encouraging people to keep walking. And so that is happening, and I'm sure if you're interested, Jason will send a link out to our information. We're excited to be doing this month. It's kind of a first start as we build towards applying to be a walk-friendly community, sort of very similar to the bicycle-friendly community program, and DMI has been very supportive of us doing that, and our goal is to apply in December and be a part of that program, get ranked, and continue to work towards improving our city as a place where it is safe for everyone to be able to walk. So you will be hearing more about that. And I also just want to put a plug in that White Cane Day is October 15th, where there's a big promotion just of understanding the laws around white cane. So we'll be doing some social media with that. The city recently did a proclamation in partnership with the Wisconsin Council for the Blind and Visually Impaired, which I feel like I switched those words around, but yeah. And so that leads me to talk about our Vision Zero promotion. We also have just started working to become a Vision Zero city, starting to work towards building an action plan, but we did do some projects this year, which we launched. You may have heard speed reduction on East Washington Avenue that happened a couple weeks ago now. And then starting Monday, we will also be doing a speed reduction on Milwaukee Street. And then we will have a few more this fall. So continue to look for that. Slow down to 25 on East Washington, closest to the Capitol if you are driving. And let's see, other big things. We have a new-ish traffic calming subcommittee that is looking at redoing the way we do our neighborhood traffic calming program and the way that we potentially do our ped and bike enhancement program. So if that is of interest to you, you can kind of see when we're meeting online, but we will be meeting. I think the plan is to maybe have that committee wrap up in February, but we will be looking at the way some of those programs might work. And then obviously it is budget season, so it is always a good time to look. The capital budget is released, the operations budget or the operating budget was released this week. So that's always a good time to just sort of stay in tune with what's happening in transportation and all the other areas as well.
Perfect. Before we get to questions for Renee, I do want to give credit where credit is due. Rob Gard was the person that really was instrumental on the walk-friendly status. So we're very, very excited that that's happening. This is really great news. It couples very closely with what Darren and the team at AARP are doing with age-friendly cities. So there's a lot of cool stuff percolating here. So sorry, I just wanted to all hail Rob on that one. Great job, Rob. Jay, I think, had a question, and somebody else. I definitely saw Jay.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So Renee, maybe I missed it, but when you were talking about speed reductions on Milwaukee and East Washington, how are those going to be manifested? And is it just a posting change, or is there going to be some sort of temporary design change to psychologically induce slower speeds?
So sure. So at this point, you know, we just had a pretty small budget for 2020 to launch the idea because we didn't really have a real program when the budget was written. So obviously we are not able to make a lot of big changes. On East Washington, we were able to add more of the high visibility crosswalks. We're going to make a little improvement at Livingston, but a lot of it is the signage, some speed boards that are out, as well as signal timing that makes it so that if you drive the speed limit, you're going to hit the green lights. If you don't, you're going to hit red lights. But obviously there's a lot more work to do, and this is just a small piece of what will be a very long-term project. And obviously one thing with especially the part of East Washington towards the Capitol, you know, we've been making a lot of changes there. There's been a lot of redevelopment, but the speed limit has not sort of changed until now with those other changes that happened previously. But, you know, we will continue to work on the corridors that are sort of high injury areas. This is just a starting place.
For East Washington, are the speed boards, are those same thing as speed tables?
No, so those are just like the message boards that.
Oh, those, gotcha.
With information. So
right.
we'll be moving them around so that people don't become just habituated to them. But we have some of those message boards that will be going around as well.
And does Madison control the speed limit on East Washington, or is it a state highway? So does the city need to work with the state, and are they amenable?
We did work with the state, and we did they were amenable to us making the change.
Great.
That's great. I was talking to Alder Heck and Rummel, and some of the speeds that have clocked on that street are triple digits. So it's,
yeah, and a lot of really that sort of stuff that's happening in the evening and things like that. We've had some other initiatives to try to change that, and that obviously the speed limit is clearly not important to people who were already going 20, 30, 40 miles per hour over, but we definitely continue to work on those hazardous behaviors that are happening throughout the night hours as well.
Thank you. And I think Renee and the team are meeting at Signature in about 15 minutes thereafter. Correct, Renee?
Mm-hmm, correct.
Any other questions for Renee? All right. Any other partner? Or Zia, did you have an MPO update? I mean, you just gave a really long one, but okay. And then, Morgan or Helen, anyone, B-Cycle, any updates there from anyone else?
Yeah, thanks. Helen had jumped off, so I'll just give you a couple of quick hits. We are in the process of renewing our operating agreement with the city of Madison, so very excited to continue to grow that partnership into the future. So stay tuned for that. Thanks to Renee and all of her city partners for making that awesome. And then we are going to do another roll to the poll campaign as we come towards the election. You know, we've in the past given free rides, and this year will be no exception. So stay tuned for info about that. And if you can help amplify that message to get more people taking advantage of it, that would be awesome.
Questions for Morgan and the team at B-Cycle? Thank you. All right, anyone else with updates? If not, I just want to make sure, Renee, Darren has a question for you about how he can find out about the traffic calming meetings too. So maybe
Sure, so
I can make that connection.
the city has a just an online site for all of their meetings, and you all see the traffic calming subcommittee listed. It's meeting every other Thursday night at 5 o'clock. So if you go online, you'll see the rotation of which every other week it is.
And any questions, Darren, let us know. We can help you navigate that as well. Was there anyone else? I thought I heard someone chime in. Nope. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great Friday, the rest of the Friday, and a great weekend. Looks like great weather. Enjoy it. Thank you all very much for your continued support.